The wishful whisper. The fluorescent lights of Pine Grove Community Hospital buzzed softly overhead as Nora Whitman completed her rounds. 12 years as a nurse in this small-town hospital had settled into a comfortable rhythm, reliable as the seasons, predictable as the morning sun that filtered through the blinds of room 214. "Mr. Patterson, your medication," Nora said, her voice carrying the gentle authority that came from years of patient care. She adjusted her dark curly hair, tucking a rebellious strand behind her ear as she checked his vitals. The man in the bed wasn't her usual elderly patient. Julian Patterson appeared to be in his early 40s, admitted for observation after a minor car accident. His simple clothes and unassuming manner gave no indication that he was anything more than an ordinary traveler passing through Pine Grove. "Thank you," Julian replied, setting aside a worn leather journal. "How long have you worked here, Ms. Whitman?" "All my adult life," Nora admitted with a small smile. "Started right after nursing school at 22. "You must have seen many places in your career," he observed, taking the pills she offered. Nora laughed softly, a sound tinged with an old longing. "Actually, I've never traveled anywhere. Not even to Richmond, and that's just 3 hours away." She busied herself with his chart, suddenly self-conscious. "My father got sick when I was finishing school. Then when he passed, my grandmother needed care. Now it's just habit, I suppose." Julian's eyes, a thoughtful gray-green, studied her with unexpected interest. "What would you see if you could go anywhere?" The question caught her off guard. Patients rarely asked about her dreams. "The ocean," she answered without hesitation. "I've only seen it in pictures. And Greece, the white buildings against that impossible blue. The aurora borealis." Nora stopped herself, embarrassed by her enthusiasm. "Silly dreams for a small-town nurse." "Dreams are never silly," Julian replied quietly. "They're what make us who we are." Their conversation was interrupted when Dr. Phillips entered, discussing Julian's discharge for the following day. As the doctor left, Nora noticed a book that had fallen from Julian's bedside table. A photography collection of Southeast Asian temples. "You travel often?" she asked, handing him the book. "It's part of my work," he answered vaguely. "I coordinate humanitarian projects." Nora nodded, imagining a modest non-profit worker traveling economy class to faraway places she'd only dreamed of. The thought left a bittersweet ache. That evening, as she drove home to her small apartment, past the familiar storefronts of Pine Grove's main street, Nora found herself wondering what lay beyond the mountains that framed her town like sentinels. Her grandmother had passed 3 years ago, leaving Nora with no family ties. Yet still she remained, tethered by invisible strings of habit and fear of the unknown. Her apartment greeted her with the same comforting silence. Framed travel posters, gifts from well-meaning friends, adorned walls she'd never had time to repaint. On her bookshelf stood a collection of travel guides, their spines barely cracked. Nora made her usual cup of chamomile tea and settled by the window. Outside, the same view she'd known for 34 years spread before her. The corner grocery, Mrs. Hendricks walking her dachshund, the maple tree that turned brilliant orange each fall. She didn't notice the light still on in room 214, where Julian Patterson sat making phone calls, his simple appearance belying the influence of his words, or how, between conversations, his thoughts kept returning to the nurse with dreams locked away like treasures too precious to unearth. Neither knew that tomorrow would bring a question that would change everything. The gentle invitation 3 days after Julian Patterson's discharge from Pine Grove Community Hospital, Nora found herself thinking about the quiet man with the travel-worn journal. Patients came and went in her life, brief intersections before continuing on separate paths. Yet something about their conversation had lingered, like the scent of rain long after a storm had passed. "Nora, you have a visitor at reception," called Beatrice, the head nurse, interrupting Nora's inventory of the medication cart. Puzzled, Nora made her way to the front desk. She rarely received visitors during her shifts. Standing beside the reception counter was Julian, dressed in a simple navy sweater and khaki pants, looking far healthier than when he'd left the hospital. "Mr. Patterson," she said, surprised. "Is everything all right? No complications, I hope?" Julian smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "No complications? And please call me Julian." He gestured toward the small hospital cafe. "Do you have a moment?" Checking her watch, Nora nodded. "I'm due for a break anyway." The cafe was nearly empty at this hour. Through the windows, afternoon sunlight painted golden rectangles across their table. Julian ordered coffee for both of them before turning his attention fully to Nora. "I've been thinking about our conversation," he began, his hands wrapped around his mug. "About travel and dreams deferred." Nora felt a flush of embarrassment. "I rambled too much that day." "Unprofessional of me." "On the contrary," Julian replied. "Your honesty was refreshing." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I'm here because I have a proposition." From his messenger bag, he withdrew a folder and slid it across the table. Nora opened it cautiously to find brochures for a place called Nueva Esperanza, a small coastal community in Ecuador. "Every year, I take a team to help establish medical clinics in underserved regions," Julian explained. "We need a skilled nurse for our trip next month. It's volunteer work, 3 weeks in total, but all expenses are covered through our foundation." Nora stared at the photographs of azure waters meeting white sand, of children with bright smiles, of medical staff working in simple but functional facilities. "You're offering me a job?" she asked, confusion evident in her voice. "I'm offering you an opportunity," Julian corrected gently, "to use your skills somewhere they're desperately needed, while perhaps fulfilling some of those dreams you mentioned." Her mind raced with immediate objections. "I couldn't possibly. My job here, my apartment, my responsibilities." "The foundation can arrange for temporary housing for your absence," Julian continued. "And I've already spoken with Dr. Phillips. He says the hospital could manage without you for 3 weeks, especially since you haven't taken vacation in over 4 years. Nora's eyes widened. "You spoke with my supervisor before asking me?" "I wanted to ensure it was feasible before getting your hopes up," Julian replied, his expression apologetic. "Was that presumptuous?" It was, but Nora found she wasn't offended. Instead, a strange feeling was blooming in her chest, something between terror and exhilaration. "Why me?" she finally asked. There must be dozens of qualified nurses eager for such an opportunity. Julian's gaze was steady. "Because when you spoke of seeing the ocean for the first time, I remembered what it felt like to discover the world. That kind of genuine appreciation is rare." He smiled slightly. "And frankly, your patient care record is impressive. Dr. Phillips speaks highly of your clinical skills." Nora glanced again at the brochure, her fingers tracing the coastline in the photograph. Something unfamiliar stirred within her, the awakening of a dormant possibility. I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course. The trip isn't for another month." Julian slid a business card across the table. "My number. Call me when you decide either way." That night, Nora couldn't sleep. She paced her small apartment, the brochure open on her coffee table like a portal to another world. Could she really do this? Leave Pine Grove even temporarily? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. She picked up her phone and called the only person who might understand. "Ellie?" "It's me. Sorry for calling so late, but something happened today." Ellie Thompson had been Nora's friend since childhood, the one who'd left Pine Grove to become a teacher in Boston, who sent postcards from weekend trips to New York and Montreal. "A handsome stranger wants to whisk you away to Ecuador," Ellie summarized after Nora explained. "Sounds like the beginning of either a romance novel or a horror movie." "It's professional," Nora insisted. "A medical mission. Have you researched this foundation of his?" Nora bit her lip. "Not yet. Do that first," Ellie advised. "But Nora, if it's legitimate, go. You've put your life on hold for so long. Maybe it's time to press play." After hanging up, Nora opened her laptop and searched for Nueva Esperanza Foundation. The website appeared professional. Photographs of medical clinics, schools, and water purification projects. And there on the Our Team page was Julian Patterson. The brief biography described him as founder and director of international operations. What it didn't mention was that Julian Patterson was also the CEO of Patterson Innovations, a technology company valued at billions. That discovery came through a separate search, one that left Nora staring at her screen in disbelief. The man in the hospital bed, the one with the simple clothes and worn journal, was not just any humanitarian worker. He was one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs in the country. The First Horizon. The airport terminal buzzed with activity as Nora clutched her brand new passport, the blank pages still crisp between her fingers. 1 month had passed since Julian's unexpected proposal, a month of vaccinations, expedited paperwork, and nights spent watching travel documentaries about Ecuador. "First time flying?" Julian asked, appearing beside her with 2 coffee cups. He handed one to Nora, who accepted it gratefully. "Is it that obvious?" She attempted a smile, but her nervousness showed in the way she kept checking her boarding pass. "Only slightly," he replied with a kind smile. "The rest of the team is meeting us there. It'll be just 8 of us total. 2 doctors, 3 nurses including yourself, a logistics coordinator, and a local guide." Nora nodded, trying to process this information while simultaneously absorbing the overwhelming sensations of the international terminal. Announcements echoed overhead in multiple languages. Travelers rushed past pulling suitcases, some looking harried, others excited. The scent of coffee mingled with perfume from the duty-free shops. "I researched you," Nora blurted out suddenly. The confession had been sitting on her tongue since she'd discovered Julian's true identity. Julian's expression remained unchanged. "I thought you might. You never mentioned that your company would—" Nora struggled to find the right words. "Would it have made a difference?" Julian asked quietly. Before Nora could answer, their flight was called for boarding. As they walked toward the gate, Julian added, "I find that people treat me differently when they know. I prefer to be judged by my actions rather than my bank account." The enormity of what she was doing hit Nora as she fastened her seatbelt. She was leaving American soil, flying over an ocean, traveling to a continent she'd only seen in documentaries. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the armrests during takeoff. Julian, seated beside her, noticed her white knuckles. "The first time is always the most intense," he said. "Try looking out the window as we climb. It helps to see the transition." Nora turned to watch as Pine Grove, her entire world for 34 years, shrank beneath them. The hospital where she'd spent countless hours, the apartment building she called home, the grocery store where they knew her by name, all reduced to miniatures, then merely patterns, then vanishing altogether as they pierced the cloud layer. "It's beautiful," she whispered as sunlight illuminated the cloud tops, transforming them into a landscape of glowing alabaster mountains. "This is just the beginning," Julian replied. During the long flight, Julian briefed her on their mission, establishing a semi-permanent clinic in a coastal village, training local health workers, and implementing a maternal health program. Nora listened intently, asking questions that revealed her thorough preparation and genuine concern for the patients they would serve. "Most of our volunteers are experienced travelers," Julian observed. "Your perspective will be valuable. You'll notice needs that others might overlook." The first glimpse of the South American coastline from the airplane window left Nora speechless. The vastness of the Pacific Ocean stretching to the horizon, the lush green terrain, the sprawling city of Guayaquil below. It was overwhelming in its beauty and scale. After clearing customs, a van transported them from the airport to the coastal region where their project awaited. Nora pressed her face to the window, taking in every detail of this new world. Roadside fruit stands bursting with unfamiliar colors, children playing soccer in dusty fields, mountains rising majestically in the distance. When the road curved and the ocean appeared before them, Julian touched her shoulder gently. "We're stopping here," he said. "I thought you might want a moment." The driver pulled over at a scenic overlook. Nora stepped out of the van and the warm, salt-laden breeze immediately embraced her. Before her stretched the Pacific Ocean, vast and glittering under the afternoon sun, waves rolling inexorably toward the shore. She walked forward as if in a trance, stopping only when she reached a low stone wall at the edge of the overlook. The immensity of it overwhelmed her, this living, breathing entity that covered most of their planet, that she had somehow lived without seeing for 3 decades. "It's different from photographs," she said when Julian joined her. "They can't capture the movement or the sound or the way it seems to go on forever." "We'll go down to the beach tomorrow," Julian promised. "You can put your feet in the water." Nora nodded, unable to articulate how something so simple could mean so much. Instead, she simply watched the waves, committing every detail to memory. The way sunlight danced on the water's surface, the rhythm of the surf against the shore, the endless blue meeting the sky at a horizon she had only imagined until now. Julian observed her quietly, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. This was why he had invited her, to witness this pure, unfiltered joy at experiencing something most took for granted. As they continued their journey to Nueva Esperanza, Nora felt something shifting within her, as if the person who had boarded the plane in the United States was not quite the same as the one now traveling along this coastal road. The change was subtle but undeniable, like the first crack in a shell that had grown too confining. Their accommodations were simple but comfortable. A small hotel near the village where they would establish their clinic. From her room's balcony, Nora could see the ocean, hear its constant murmur. That night, she fell asleep to its rhythm, dreaming of white buildings against impossible blue skies and northern lights dancing above snowy landscapes. In the morning, she would begin her work as a nurse in this new environment. But for now, she savored the knowledge that she had finally, irrevocably, left home behind, and found that the world was even more magnificent than she had dared to imagine. The hidden purpose. The makeshift clinic buzzed with activity as the morning sun filtered through the open windows, casting golden rectangles across the freshly painted walls. 2 weeks into their mission, Nora had settled into a rhythm that somehow felt both foreign and familiar. Her hands moved confidently as she administered vaccines to a line of waiting children, her Spanish improving daily through necessity and practice. "You're a natural at this," remarked Dr. Vanessa Rodriguez, one of the physicians on their team. "The children trust you immediately." Nora smiled, gently placing a colorful bandage on a little boy's arm. "It helps that you taught me how to say 'this will only pinch for a second' in Spanish." She handed the child a sticker, watching as he ran back to his mother with a proud grin. The clinic had transformed dramatically since their arrival. What had once been an abandoned schoolhouse now functioned as a proper medical facility, complete with examination rooms, a pharmacy, and a small laboratory. Local volunteers had been trained to assist with basic procedures, ensuring the clinic would continue operating long after the American team departed. During a brief lull, Nora stepped outside to feel the ocean breeze against her face. Nueva Esperanza spread before her, a fishing village of modest homes painted in weathered pastels, fishing boats bobbing in the small harbor, the ever-present ocean stretching beyond. In just 2 weeks she had come to recognize faces, to exchange greetings with locals who now smiled in recognition. Taking a break, Julian joined her, his skin bronzed from days spent alternating between clinic coordination and helping with construction of a water purification system. "Just catching my breath," Nora replied. "We vaccinated 43 children this morning." "Impressive," Julian nodded approvingly. "The mayor wants to host a dinner for our team tonight." A small gesture of appreciation from the village. Before Nora could respond, her attention was drawn to a commotion at the harbor. A fishing boat was returning, men shouting and gesturing urgently. Even from a distance, she could see someone was injured. Without hesitation, Nora ran toward the harbor, Julian close behind. A fisherman had been caught in netting and pulled underwater, nearly drowning before his companions could free him. Now he lay on the dock, coughing up seawater, a deep gash across his thigh where a knife had slipped during his desperate struggle to free himself. Nora assessed the situation quickly, applying pressure to stem the bleeding while instructing others in rapid Spanish to elevate his legs. Julian was already on his satellite phone calling for Dr. Rodriguez. Within minutes, they had transferred the injured fisherman to the clinic. As Dr. Rodriguez prepared to suture the wound, Nora assisted with practiced efficiency, anticipating needs before they were voiced. "You've done this before," the doctor observed as they worked. "Many times," Nora replied. "Emergency department rotations at Pine Grove might not compare to this. But trauma is trauma." Hours later, with the fisherman stabilized and recovering, Nora finally stepped away to change her bloodied scrubs. The adrenaline that had carried her through the emergency was fading, leaving behind bone-deep fatigue. She found Julian waiting outside the clinic, his expression somber. "You were extraordinary today," he said. "You helped save that man's life." "It was teamwork," Nora demurred, unused to direct praise. "True," Julian acknowledged. "But I saw something in you today that I suspected was there. A strength that transcends your technical skills. That's why I wanted you here." The setting sun cast long shadows across the village square as they walked toward the small restaurant where the dinner would be held. Nora found herself studying Julian with new curiosity. Despite working closely for 2 weeks, he remained something of an enigma, present yet somehow reserved, generous but guarded about his personal life. "Why did you really invite me, Julian?" she asked suddenly. There are thousands of qualified nurses in the States. Why track down a small-town nurse who'd never left her home state? Julian was silent for a moment, his pace slowing. When I was in your hospital, I watched how you interacted with patients. You have a rare quality, genuine empathy combined with competence. But there was something else. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You spoke about seeing the world with such longing, yet you'd put your dreams aside for others. I recognize that sacrifice because I've seen it before. In whom? Nora pressed, sensing something personal in his tone. My mother, Julian admitted quietly. She was a nurse too. Brilliant, compassionate. She had dreams of working with Doctors Without Borders, seeing the world while helping others. Instead, she spent her life in one small clinic in Minnesota, raising me alone after my father died. Understanding dawned on Nora. You're doing for me what she never got to do for herself. Julian nodded. She passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. In her final days, her biggest regret wasn't that she'd sacrificed for me. It was that she'd used me as an excuse long after I was grown and successful. She'd created a cage of obligation and comfort that became impossible to leave. The revelation hung between them as they approached the restaurant, where villagers were already gathering. Before they entered, Julian added, I didn't bring you here out of pity. Nora, I brought you here because talent and compassion should never be confined to one small corner of the world. The dinner was a joyous affair despite the day's drama. The mayor made a speech thanking the American team, special mention going to Nurse Nora, who had helped save a beloved community member. Children presented them with handmade cards. A local band played traditional music that soon had everyone dancing. During the festivities, Nora noticed Julian speaking intently with the mayor and other village elders. Money wasn't explicitly mentioned, but she recognized the body language of negotiation, of promises being made. Later, she overheard fragments of a phone call, Julian instructing someone to transfer the funds immediately and ensure the equipment arrives next week. As the evening wound down, Nora found herself beside Gabriella, their local translator, a university student who had returned to her home village to assist with the medical mission. Julian Patterson is a remarkable man, Gabriella commented, following Nora's gaze to where Julian chatted with elderly fishermen, seemingly oblivious to his designer watch, the one incongruous element in his otherwise understated appearance. Yes, he is, Nora agreed. You know, before his foundation came, we had no hope of a permanent clinic, Gabriella continued. The government promised for years but delivered nothing. Then Mr. Patterson visited 3 years ago, just passing through, he said, and everything changed. What do you mean? He built the school first, then housing for teachers. Next came scholarships for students like me. Now the clinic. Gabriella's eyes shone with admiration. He never allows his name on anything. Never brings cameras or publicity. Just helps and leaves, returning once a year to see the progress. As this new information settled over Nora, she watched Julian with fresh eyes. The quiet businessman from her hospital room, the humble humanitarian who slept in the same basic accommodations as the rest of the team, the billionaire who could have been anywhere in the world but chose to be here. These fragments began forming a more complete picture. That night, standing on the small balcony of her room, Nora gazed at the ocean, its surface silvered by moonlight. She thought about cages of obligation and comfort, about dreams deferred, about second chances arriving in unexpected forms. And she wondered what would happen when this journey ended, whether she could return to Pine Grove unchanged, or whether, like the tide before her, something fundamental had shifted, never to return to its previous boundaries. The shared destiny. The final days in Nueva Esperanza passed in a blur of activity. Medical records were organized, local staff received their last training sessions, and the pharmacy was fully stocked with 6 months of supplies. As their departure approached, Nora found herself cataloging sensory memories. The particular quality of morning light on the ocean, the scent of salt and tropical flowers, the cadence of children's laughter as they played in the village square. On their last evening, Nora walked alone to the beach, drawn to the waves that had become a constant soundtrack to her transformation. 3 weeks ago, she had been a small-town nurse who had never seen the ocean. Now she stood with sand between her toes, watching the sun melt into the horizon in a spectacular display of orange and purple. I thought I might find you here. Julian's voice came from behind her. Nora turned, smiling as he approached. "I'm trying to memorize it all." "As if you could forget," he replied, joining her at the water's edge. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the changing colors of the sunset. 3 weeks of shared purpose had created an ease between them, a connection built on mutual respect and growing understanding. "What happens tomorrow?" Nora finally asked, giving voice to the question that had haunted her for days. Julian glanced at her. "We fly to Guayaquil, then connect to Miami, then—" "No," Nora interrupted gently. "I mean after that, when we return to our real lives. Who says this isn't real?" Julian challenged, his gaze returning to the horizon. The question lingered between them as darkness settled over the beach. Stars appeared overhead, more numerous and brilliant than Nora had ever seen in Pine Grove. "I can't go back," she said finally, her voice barely audible above the waves. "Not to the same life, the same routines. Not after this." Julian nodded as if he'd been expecting this. "What will you do instead?" "I don't know exactly," Nora admitted. "But I've been thinking about what you said, about talent and compassion not being confined to one corner of the world." She took a deep breath. "I've spoken with Dr. Rodriguez. She works with a program that places medical professionals in underserved communities around the world. 3-month rotations. You'd be perfect for that," Julian said, genuine approval warming his voice. "It's terrifying." Nora laughed softly. "But so was boarding that first plane, and now look at me, standing on a beach in Ecuador planning a completely different future." Julian turned to face her fully. In the fading light, his expression was earnest, almost vulnerable. "Nora, there's something I should tell you, something I've been considering since we arrived." But before he could continue, they were interrupted by Gabriella running toward them along the beach, waving excitedly. "You must come quickly," she called. "Everyone is at the community center. Something amazing has happened." Exchanging puzzled glances, they followed Gabriella back to the village. The community center, a simple building with a tin roof, was filled with people gathered around the only computer with internet access. "Look." Gabriella pointed to the screen where a video was playing, a video of Nora treating patients, teaching local health workers, laughing with children. Interspersed were clips of Julian working alongside villagers to build clinic shelving, carrying an elderly woman through flooding after an unexpected rainstorm, distributing medicines. "One of the university students made this," Gabriella explained. "He posted it just 3 days ago, and already it has over 2 million views." Nora watched in astonishment as images of their work flickered across the screen. The final frame showed her and Julian silhouetted against the sunset on the beach, with text overlaid. "A millionaire entrepreneur and a small-town nurse who had never left home brought hope to Nueva Esperanza. Their journey reminds us that the greatest wealth lies in what we give, not what we have." "I had no idea anyone was filming," Julian murmured, looking genuinely surprised. "Are you upset?" Nora asked, knowing how carefully he guarded his privacy. Julian considered for a moment, then shook his head. "No. Perhaps it's time people saw that wealth can be used for more than luxury and power." The video had sparked an unexpected chain reaction. Comments poured in from around the world, offers of donations, medical supplies, and volunteers for future missions. What had been a small foundation project had suddenly gained international attention. Later that night, as the village celebrated their unexpected fame with music and dancing under the stars, Julian finally shared what he'd been about to tell Nora on the beach. "I'm expanding the foundation," he explained as they sat slightly apart from the festivities, "creating a network of clinics like this one in coastal regions around the world. The project needs a director of nursing operations, someone who understands both clinical excellence and human connection." His eyes met hers. "I was going to ask if you'd consider the position." Nora's breath caught. "You want me to work for your foundation?" "Full-time." "With me," Julian corrected gently. "Not for me, as a partner in this vision." "But I've only just started to travel to see the world," Nora protested. Julian smiled. "That's precisely the point. The job would involve establishing nursing protocols across different cultures, training local staff, traveling to each new location." He paused. "You'd see more of the world in a year than most people see in a lifetime." Under the blanket of stars, with the sound of celebration surrounding them, Nora felt the final pieces of her old life falling away, not painfully, but like autumn leaves making room for new growth. There's something else you should know, Julian added, his voice softer. These past weeks have shown me that what began as professional admiration has become something more. I'm not offering this position because of personal feelings, it's yours regardless. But I would be remiss not to tell you that I care for you, Nora. Deeply. The admission hung in the air between them, unexpected yet somehow inevitable. Nora studied Julian's face, the sincerity in his eyes, the slight tension in his jaw as he waited for her response. I think I've been falling for you since you asked me what I'd see if I could go anywhere, she confessed. Not because of who you are or what you can offer, but because you saw something in me that I'd forgotten was there. Their first kiss tasted of salt air and possibility, tender and unhurried beneath the Ecuadorian stars. 6 months later, a follow-up video went viral, showing the expanded clinic in Nueva Esperanza now serving 5 surrounding communities, with Nora training a new generation of local nurses. Julian appeared briefly, no longer hiding his connection to the foundation that bore his late mother's maiden name rather than his own. The final scene showed Nora and Julian standing together beneath the aurora borealis in Iceland, her dream of seeing the northern lights finally fulfilled. Their joined hands bore matching simple bands, their faces illuminated by the dancing celestial lights. The caption read, "The journey continues." From a small-town hospital room to changing lives around the world, their story reminds us that sometimes the most unexpected connections lead to the most extraordinary destinations. Back in Pine Grove, the hospital staff gathered around a computer to watch their former colleagues' journey unfold. They marveled at how a chance encounter had led to such transformation. How a simple admission, "I've never traveled anywhere," had opened a door to possibilities none of them could have imagined. And in airports around the world, people began asking strangers where they'd always dreamed of going but never managed to reach. Small acts of kindness multiplied, inspired by a story that continued to touch hearts long after the algorithms had moved on to the next viral sensation. For Nora and Julian, the viral fame was merely a footnote to their real story. One written not in views and shares but in lives changed, horizons expanded, and a love that had found its perfect expression in service to others. Together, they had discovered that the greatest journey wasn't measured in miles traveled or countries visited, but in the distance between who they had once been and who they had become together.